What sort of man is this? The winds and the sea obey him. I've come across about 3 testimonies of this miracle happening. We might be surprised, but why should we be? Is it a miracle so surprising for the one who said, "Let it be," and the whole of creation flowed from his brain? For him, a miracle is just the placing of an unexpected cause in the chain of cause and effect in time. One was some years ago, in the early days of Knock, when people could still scratch away at the gable end. A pious lady was there and took a small part of where Our Lady had appeared at Knock and put it in a small bag in her pocket. Some time later, she had to make what was still at the time a big journey over the Atlantic to America, and a terrible storm broke out, and people were quite nervous. So, knowing that Our Lady would not let her down, she took out her treasure, cast it on the water, poured out the whole contents of the bag, and there was a great calm. Sometime later in our history, there was a Protestant minister on that same, at the time, dangerous journey. And the same thing happened again, and he was really nervous. People were praying. And he noticed this gentleman doing something. He fumbled around his neck and threw something in the waves. And lo and behold, there was a great calm. Sometime later, when the dust had settled, he approached the man. "What happened, sir? I noticed that you put something on the water, and there's an immediate change." I was wearing something which I knew to be powerful. It was what we call a brown scapular. I invoked the Blessed Virgin, and I cast it on the waters, and you saw what happened. The Reverend gentleman went away, scratched his intellectual head, and thought, "That simple Irishman knows more than I do. Maybe he has the truth," and he became a Roman Catholic. I heard it from an evangelical American evangelist that among Christians, those who have most miracles, and he was saying it as a Protestant evangelical, are actually Roman Catholics. And he had to explain himself. Well, let's give it to them. They believe they're handling God every day at the altar. Therefore, they must be used to him. And it does seem that things happen. Take a journey to Lourdes. And so he just rendered himself to the facts. And do you know that one time in school days, when still an evangelical Protestant myself, I was having doubts. Can you prove that God is? And I went up to one of the staff, whom I knew to be an evangelical, and I asked him for help. How can you prove that God is? He took me to a lab, sat me down on a stool, and said one or two things. But one of the things he said was, strangely, "Well, you've heard about places like Lourdes." Interesting. And then sometime later, I happened to watch with my father the Song of Bernadette. And what was that saying? It was saying things which were uncomfortable to hear. Immaculate Conception. Miracles. heaven using a Catholic language. Ouch. It was becoming more and more uncomfortable. And so I picked up books, and we were in one of the most Protestant parts of Britain, Llanfyllin, mid Wales, near the family farm. And I went into the local library and I found a book of miracles. I picked it up and couldn't put it down. Each category was looked into and names were given to each. And I noticed one thing through them all. God is not just doing miracles of healing here, he's actually speaking a Catholic language. I had things like this before my eyes. A priest in doubt, not just about God, but about specifically God in the Blessed Sacrament. And what did God do? It was in Bolsena in 1263. He was celebrating, and as he did the elevation of the host, it bled in his hands, and the precious blood dropped onto the corporal and the marble. Years later, by the way, I was able to venerate that marble. I read on. I got to what happened at Fatima. Now this was becoming really uncomfortable. We had 70,000 people of all descriptions, including an anti-Catholic press, looking at heaven behave, and pictures taken. And it went on, what was actually said. The Queen of Heaven was using very Roman Catholic language, referring to the Holy Father, referring to things like the dogma of the faith. In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved. I put the book down and said to myself, that's it. I can't stay where I am. So I went to see my minister, good Baptist, and his eyes became as wide as saucers. I said to him in Welsh, I wanted to become a pabydd, a papist. A what? God. And he taught me through all the nonsense they were up to, all the classical scandal and examples. The appeal will wear off. Stay where you are. Because when being baptized, I made a promise of obedience to some extent and to receive counsel from the elders, I stayed put. 3 months later, went to him again. I want to become a pabydd. So he tried again with a heavy tirade. This time, there was nothing doing. And then, on the way to chapel, I asked Dad to put me off at the Roman Catholic Church one Sunday morning. And I walked in, and it was in Latin, the Benedictine church, clouds of incense, Gregorian chant, the same Mass exactly as we have now. And I knew, this is home. But before then, a lot had happened. Because wandering into the church, I sensed there was a presence there. I could feel it. And by the way, if you scratch and you talk to a sincere Protestant who's had the same experience, eventually he'll tell you the same thing. There's something there. They sort of know it. That's why they're so noisy about it. We aren't noisy. When we talk about the faith, we just have possession of it serenely. I mentioned that serenity in a wider context. There can be storms, huge storms, and the stormier they are, the better the sign is that old Nick is not happy, so we're doing something right. Do you know, But every time there was any question of my being ordained, it was blocked for years and years and years. And then the power of a letter. Go to St. Antimo. And this wonderful letter came out of the blue from the prior. I could see here God was breaking through all the barriers and saying, come this way and we'll keep you safe. 1 year later, it came to a question of perpetual vows, because they made things very short. And I put my head on the high altar while they were voting. And I knew that if they said yes on that high altar, I'd be consecrating the Lamb of God, doing that miracle which had taken me to my foundations earlier in life. The prior came out and said in French, vous avez été accepté, you've been accepted unanimously. And I wept. There one sees two things. That God is in ultimate control. And that, as I've learned from Julian Norwich earlier in life, there is a guiding hand. And that things that happen ultimately are bound to conform to that guiding hand. And she was given this knowledge in her reclusory way back in the 1400s or even earlier. All shall be well. And she had no exception made. The only thing that is not done by God is sin. It's an absence and a pulling on his power and a manipulation of what he gives us to act with. But the guiding hand redresses the balance, and all things work together for good for those who love God. And it all made sense. And then, just 25 years ago, just the other day, 25th of March, the Archbishop came back after a few weeks, laid his hand on me and made me a deacon. And as I preach now, a close friend of mine who was with me just the other day is being made a deacon, perpetual deacon, Pat Butterley. What do I say? Listen, my friends, because God finds one obstacle to action even though he's almighty. It's the human will. And there might be some here who are putting that obstacle in his way. If God calls you, don't turn away. I assure you, you'll never find peace in anything less once you've been close to the centre of all. Just yield, and he will take over.